Mayor Dave? Is that what we're doing tonight, or what? And as always, we are joined by Manchester Mayor Ted Gatsas. First and most important question, Your Honor, how's your coffee this morning?
I guess it's okay, but I understand you had a delivery, and shame on you for not bringing at least a box of Joe for your cohorts that are here with you. So I would have liked to have had some of that Dunkin' Donuts, but
Well, actually, you are drinking Dunkin' Donuts.
well,
Granted, it's made at our coffee maker here.
yeah. There's a difference.
But it
This
is,
one would be out of business real quick.
but it is Dunkin' Donuts. Well, see, our good friend Bill Wynn from Goffstown today, he likes to bring me decaf because I don't drink caffeine, but the rest of the people around here do. So you're
I
actually.
didn't know that you couldn't order regular coffee at the window and a decaf along with it. I didn't know that that couldn't be done.
Your Honor, I will.
Or is this Dunkin' Donuts out here in Goffstown only sell decaf?
I don't know.
All right.
I'll have to go down there and check. But you know what, Mr. Mayor, next week.
I heard that 2 weeks ago when I came.
I will personally make sure that there is a hot coffee here from Dunkin' Donuts. Just tell me how you take it.
Medium regular in a large cup.
Medium regular in a large cup. Okay. Your Honor, as you know from listening to the show, we're going to get to what happened at the Board of Mayor and Aldermen last night, but as you know, we've been talking about school violence here on the show following an incident that took place at Memorial High last week. And our goal in doing this is to sort of help people understand what happens when an incident like this takes place from the police point of view, from the school point of view, the administration's point of view, I should say. And there's a component here that I do want to take a little time to talk to you about. We're going to, I think, talk in more detail about it with Committeewoman Ambrosi tomorrow, because she sits on the Student Conduct Committee. But if you take a look at the process, and we learned about this yesterday in interviewing the superintendent, if you take a look at the process of handling these things, the principals at the building level have got a certain amount of authority, which if they want to do more than what they can do, they bump it up to the superintendent. And I guess when there's bodily harm that occurs, it automatically gets reported to the superintendent. And he has discretion to handle it as long as it's not an expulsion. The question I have for you is, do you think the way the system is currently set up adequately addresses the situation, or do you think that there should be something in the way the school board handles the policies? Now, as an elected official, and this is not a reflection on Superintendent Brennan, who I think probably handles these things pretty well. But in cases where there's an assault and there's physical harm done to the victim, should there be something in place that at least notifies the school board's conduct committee so that they're aware of what's taking place in the schools on an ongoing basis as it happens, rather than just because the superintendent thought the infraction was bad enough, shall we say, to refer it to?
Well, Rich, that was a pretty long question for a pretty short answer. Let me just first say that over a year ago, we had these discussions at the school board. We had Scott Legacy and the superintendent and the chief of police come in and talk about it. Tell us that any incident should be reported, one, to the police, and then go forward from there. So, you know, this is not something that just happened for the first time. Certainly it's a sad incident. I feel very bad for the young lady that got beat up. And certainly it's an issue that will be addressed both by the school district and the superintendent. But again, let's remember that the discussions were that anything, you know, there's this thing that we all believe, or at least the educators believe, that when it happens within the school bounds, that it doesn't have to go any further.
Yeah, it doesn't count.
Well, I can tell you that if that same incident, and it probably would have been handled the same way if it happened outside of school grounds, but I think some of the things that we hear is students with IEPs, you know, it's a manifestation of their problem, and that is kind of like out of bounds. That child isn't penalized. So if 3 kids get into a fight and one of them has an IEP, or they do something that's even worse than that, then 2 of them could be suspended, and the child with the IEP, because it's a manifestation of his disability, then he's kind of looked at it in a different light, and that's wrong. You know, if that same manifestation and the same problem happened outside of school bounds, the police would be involved, and we would be going from there. But again, you know, we've been talking about this, Rich. The discussions didn't just come up. Now, you know, there's 7 new school board members, and maybe we have to address it. But if you take a look at the workers' comp monthly report that I look at, because it's a concern to me, because obviously workers' comp claims affect the budget. And if you see some of the things that are done, I'm not too sure that all of those are reported to the police department. I read one the other day that a student, you know, took a paperclip and poked a teacher with it once he had it unraveled. I don't think those things, if we don't protect our teachers and our students, education is not going anywhere.
Now, and for our listeners, an IEP is an acronym for Individual Education Plan, which is what a student who is something called coded, means special education laws apply to them. They have some sort of, you know, learning or behavioral disability, and basically they're not responsible for their lack of results or their behavior. Now, here's, you know, I wanted to talk about this, not to talk about it, but to try to get results. We had Congressman Bass on this morning, and you know, we talked about this issue with Congressman Bass, and he said he'd be glad to receive from the superintendent, and I presume anyone in the city, a listing of the areas where things like this, and we want to make sure that everybody knows this incident memorial did not involve a child with an IEP, a student with a special ed. But Congressman Bass mentioned that the reauthorization of that law is due, and he would gladly receive from the city of Manchester, as I'm sure Congressman Ginter would, areas in the law that need to be changed, because the problem you just brought up about how there's disparate treatment and there's no way to protect the kids in the environment from a violent actor who's got an individual education plan there. So there's a door open, Your Honor, for us to give Congressman Bass all kinds of information, which he says he'll act on.
Well, and that's fine, but we got to make sure we try and stop this problem, whether the child's got an IEP or not. I think that that's the important issue. You know, violence in school is a very difficult thing.
So should in cases, like at a minimum, should cases involving the bodily injury of a teacher or a student, should they automatically be referred to the student conduct committee of the school board?
The first place they should be reported to is the police department.
Well, and
that's the first place they should be.
Well, and then you've got all the juvenile laws and everything else, but they are being reported to the police, at least according to the schools. Although we did find out from Superintendent Brennan that not everything that happens in the schools gets reported to the police, and he's going to get us a report of the non-police reportable items. But should the school board's conduct committee, in cases where there is bodily harm to a teacher, a student, or anybody else in a school building as a result of the actions of a student, should they automatically receive a report so that they can get involved if they choose to? As I understand right now, the student conduct committee only gets involved in violence in the schools if and only if the superintendent sees fit to refer to it.
And that's correct. And you know, again, and that's probably the one committee that is as different as you can find in the city. It used to be a committee of the whole with the school board.
Meaning a whole school board.
The whole school board sat in judgment. And what happened is that they couldn't get a quorum of 8 to show up to the meetings, and they had to cancel them, and that meant parents and students and people coming and lawyers coming, and all of a sudden there was no quorum. They had to reschedule it and postpone it for that evening. There's 5 members. I can't tell you, I don't sit on that committee. I can't tell you when they meet, how they meet, what the results are, who they hear, what they hear, and only the 5 members of that committee are privy to that information. Now, I can't tell you that's a bad thing, and they say it's because of the student. It could be a minor, it could be many other things, but we're all elected. And, you try and select people to sit on that committee that are going to sit there and be tough. Because, I don't think it's a fun thing for a teacher to be swung at and punched and bitten or anything else, and I think that has to be something that we need to take a look at. But again, it's a committee. I've been the mayor now for going on to the 2nd term, and I can't tell you, not once in 2 years can I tell you that I ever knew anything that went before that committee.
Gerard, our time is 7:44. After a quick check of traffic and weather, we'll be back with Mayor Ted Gatsas talking union contracts, budgets, central fleet management, And we managed to get that done in less time than 60 seconds. So we are now back with Manchester Mayor Ted Gatsas, who had a very late night last night at the Board of Mayor and Aldermen. I remember those marathon sessions, Your Honor. The police contract came before the board last night, and you folks went into non-public session somewhere around midnight. I assume to take up that contract?
No, that contract, the police contracts, both the supervisors and the patrolmen were voted on. They were in the agenda, they were voted on. There was a couple of questions, but we didn't go into non-public on those two contracts.
Did they pass unanimously last night?
They did not pass unanimously.
Who was in opposition to the police breaking the ice and setting the stage for future negotiations, not only for their contract in the future, but leading the way on the current negotiations with the rest of the unions?
I believe Alderman Lavasser was the lone vote in opposition.
Alderman Lavasser was the lone vote in opposition. Okay, so we get the police contracts put to bed. Now, there are a number of other contracts where your office announced you had reached tentative agreements.
Correct.
Were those the ones that went into non-public last night?
They did for a consensus vote, and certainly they're going back. They've already been ratified by those unions. So, normally what happens, a consensus vote comes out, the contracts go back, but the unions have ratified them already, so they will come back to the full board at the next full board agenda and be voted on for the first time, and then they will have to lay over for 2 more weeks after that.
So which unions have you come to agreement with?
Airport, the Teamsters that are at the airport, the Teamsters at the library, and also...
I gotta tell you, it cracks me up that the library workers are Teamsters. It just doesn't really fit the image, you know what I mean?
I don't know, they were pretty tough. They were pretty full force last night. And the other one is and it wasn't a union contract, but the non-affiliates who have probably the largest contingency of employees in the city. They've got over 300. And they came in, they've never really had the opportunity to sit at the table. They were kind of like the redheaded stepchild, and they got what everybody else got, and that was the end of the conversation.
Just as an aside, I always thought it was a mistake to handle the unaffiliated employees the way they were handled. It seemed to me that if you wanted to get the unions to do something different, that you would give it to the non-affiliated employees first, just as a way
I can tell you that, they came to the table. There were 5 of them that met with me, and certainly we had discussions, and there were things that they were looking for, and I said, no, here are the things that are on the table for discussion, and I can tell you that we agreed, and they signed, went back to their membership, or not membership, but their employees. Everybody came out and said that they were in favor of it, and that's a good thing. So we're working on a couple of more this week.
You also announced that you had a tentative agreement with the fire supervisors union. Is that still in play, or is that
was done? That was voted on last night. Also, that was on the agenda, so that was voted on. It's got to lay on the table for 2 more weeks.
Okay.
So we're moving forward with them. I can tell you that I was hoping that last night we were going to bring a tentative agreement on the firefighters to the board. We just didn't have enough time during the course of the day to get it done and get it signed and get it in. So we're going to be calling for a special meeting on Thursday evening at 4 o'clock to bring that one in, so that we can get a consensus vote and then get a vote for ratification from the members.
So which city unions remain? Assuming you get the consensus vote on the firemen, the rank and file, the IAF.
Yep.
Who remains?
We still have the folks from facilities, the folks from
The ASME union?
the ASME union. There are 3 separate contracts, even though they're all ASME, but there are 3 separate contracts there. We're going to be meeting with them on Thursday. Hopefully we'll have something by Friday. I can tell you Waterworks, I've not heard from them. It's, it's the only union that
that's
hasn't picked up the phone, hasn't come in, hasn't had a discussion.
But they're not a tax supported. They work off of the fees from the water user fees. They don't affect the tax rate.
Well, Rich, we're a city of one.
No, I agree with
And
you.
I can tell you that they're not going to be treated any differently than any other union.
That's probably why they're not coming forward.
Well, that's all right. That's okay.
That just means that when their contract expires,
Well, I've already sent a notice to the commission there. that I'd like to see them on the same budget schedule as the rest of the city.
That's right, they're still running a calendar.
They are, and there's no reason why they should be. They should have to come in, and we're starting to look to do a little research on how we're going to get that done. I talked to Tom Bowen about it. He's looking forward to a meeting next month. I talked to the president of the commission, and certainly he agrees that it should be in the same schedule. So it shouldn't be difficult. We can do it one of two ways. They can either come in and adjust and put a new budget forward beginning in July, because they started one in January 1st, and shut it, close it down in 6 months, or they can come in and
They don't have to go through a fiscal year conversion like the city did in order to.
No, it's not. I mean, it basically is pretty simple. We're there to help them if they run into that glitch as the city did. I think we had to bond, I forget how much money to get it through that fiscal crisis, but we can certainly lend them the money and get them to going to where they should be. And I think that everybody in the city should be on the same budget cycle. So we're working on that, and that should be happening soon.
Speaking of the waterworks, I caught Tom Bowen last night. He said the bill that they had before the legislature that would allow it to put its watershed in current use was sent to interim study, which meant the legislature killed it. Is there any hope that we can get the ratepayers?
It's funny because Tom was told that it was still alive, and my days in the legislature, when the Senate sent it to interim study,
yeah,
it was dead.
It was a quiet death. Is there anything that can be done really to get the legislature to provide? I mean, there are a handful of utilities around the state that can't take their watersheds and put them into current use, so they're being taxed as if they're developable land at the full tax rate. How does that make it? It's great if you're the town of Auburn, but it's really not so great if you're a Manchester Waterworks customer and you're paying an extra $600,000 or $700,000 in taxes that you shouldn't have to pay.
And that's why, Rich, when you asked the original question, well, they're their own entity. Well, if we could reduce costs at the water district, the water department, that means maybe we can reduce our water bills, which is a direct effect. Exactly. So there's no question that budgets do affect the people of Manchester, because the lower the rates are. And people will tell me, well, Mayor, they're the lowest in the state. Well, it doesn't mean that they can't go lower. So those are the things that we have to have pretty active discussions about. I'm working with Tom to see if we can look at some different scenarios on what we might be able to do with that watershed property and how we can reduce the taxation of it.
Okay. And speaking of budgets, you originally had hoped to propose yours on January 30th. That obviously hasn't happened because of the contract negotiations and the way the board has chosen to ratify the union contracts that obviously are going to affect your budget numbers.
Let me make it clear, Rich. They don't affect my budget numbers.
Okay.
What they do affect is that if there are numbers and layoffs in those positions and they come after the fact, that means that there needs to be 10 votes to change the cap rate to get those funds back into departments' budgets.
I see.
I don't think that was a fair thing to do to the aldermen. So rather than be unfair, I try and look at things in a fairness issue. And I thought it would be unfair knowing that these people would be coming to the table. From that point of view, the aldermen would have had to raise the tax cap to put the funds into their budget, because I would have already come forward with a budget and a tax cap.
Right. Now explain to our listeners, when you say it's a fairness issue to the aldermen, the average person listening to us right now doesn't understand why you're trying to propose a budget earlier than later as a fairness issue to the aldermen. Is it because your budget becomes the default budget?
Absolutely.
Is it because what you're negotiating here might have an impact on the cap? Explain that fairness issue.
One, it is the default budget. If there cannot be 10 votes to override the budget that's in place, it becomes the budget. At that point, we may be looking, when we originally started this discussion, and the budget that I was looking to propose was talking about 60 layoffs in the city, 20 more police officers, 12 firemen, people in the highway department. So I looked at that, and that was where we were with numbers when we had budgets presented by the departments. So we had to find a way that we could curtail some of that. We did it. Some of those things we worked on. There were 10 grant positions in the police department, and those federal grants were going away. We had to absorb that in the budget. So it wasn't an easy task. And once we completed, we still had some holes that would have meant layoffs. And that means that for the alderman to say, okay, we found X amount of dollars, or X union came to the table and we want to put those dollars into their budget, that would have increased the cap.
So it would increase the budget, would have gone over the cap, and you wouldn't have been able to do it.
Well, you could do it if you had the 10 votes to override.
The cap.
But I don't think that was a fair position to put aldermen in, to say, oh, guess what? There's the alderman again, they're raising taxes.
Okay.
So I think that the easiest way to look at it, the fairest way to look at it, is we were, things were starting to happen. And certainly it made a difference, and it's making a difference.
So when do you expect at this point you'll be able to come forward with your budget proposal?
Rich, again, we
You're gonna have to wait it out now.
well, no, I think that, there are two more big unions that we're in discussions with this week, and that may make a difference.
Manchester Mayor Ted Gatsas, as always, we appreciate your being with us. In response to your office's request, we will review our schedule and see if we can't pop you in at a little later time, especially on those nights where the Board of Aldermen keeps you up past your bedtime.
Well, it'll be an interesting discussion tomorrow with the representatives, because the redistricting is a very important issue to the city.
Yes, it's a very big one, and as soon as we're off the air, I will give you some information. Joining us afterward will be Dan Fawcett. We're in for our expensive but avoidable business blunder segment. This one ought to be fun. You want to know what the life of the box is? Stay tuned. We'll be back.